Um, First off, thank you all for joining us. I'm Colin Barnhart. I am the co-founder and CEO of Black Ink Business Services. We are a outsourced finance team. We've been servicing the film and production and creative agency space for approaching 20 years now. Um, we are joined by Rudy Callegari as the co-host. He is the uh, founder of Edge Auto, as well as Trailers, also PIA and CAP, which I'll let him speak a little bit to as well. We have Jackie Raphael, who is an SVP and executive producer, as well as another Jackie Stoloff, who is a SVP of production. Aaron Gordon, who is the co-founder of Synapse and also co-founder of Optic Sky, and Andrew Cern, who is the founder and CEO of The Electric Studios. I'm going to turn this over to Rudy in a few minutes, who's going to engage with the roundtable and get some good conversations going. While that conversation is going, I encourage you guys all to put into the Zoom chat any questions or topics you want touched on, and we'll make sure that we get to all those on the back end of the roundtable. I also encourage you all, whoever wants to, drop into the chat your LinkedIn, any other kind of contact information, say hello, just so this is a great opportunity for us to all network with each other as well. Rudy, I'm going to turn it over to you and let's get started.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're sitting. Thank you for spending an hour with us and joining. I'm going to hop right into the big question that we're going to talk about today. It's where's our industry going? There's so many pressures, there's so many changes that we have that have really fundamentally pivoted how we've made product in the past. We have financial pressures bigger than we've ever had before. Tax incentives are changing quite a bit here in the States and elsewhere around the world. Uh, AI, of course, has been a very big change, which has taken a lot of us off the streets, so to say, and putting us on stages, virtual production stages, volume stages. All of these things are really changing fundamentally how we're getting our films, TV shows, commercials finished. So today is about where we're going from both a physical, a technological place. So financial pressures is something that is probably the most important. We'll let our panel tell us if that's true or not. So saying that, I'd like to ask Jackie Sophie our first question today. Thank you, Jackie, for being with us again. Jackie, you're making budgets all day long for TV shows, scripted, unscripted, here in New York and elsewhere. Uh, Tell us what are you seeing that the pressures are being put on you to make a budget and to make a budget work that are different today than say maybe just a few years ago.
Yeah, sure. So I'm SVP of production at a small studio based out of New York, just to put it in perspective. And we mainly produce low budget comedies. So what I'm seeing in the last couple years is that the distributors aren't funding the whole production budgets anymore. So we, as a small studio, have to go out and find the rest of the budget. And if we can't find it, like with pre-sales and co-productions with other production companies, right, you have to put in the money yourself. So I've been tasked with mainly to just get the budgets as low as possible. And unfortunately, running them for various states and countries like the United States, it's just not comparable. It's way cheaper to shoot outside of America, as most of you know. So our shows are going to like Canada, Ireland, UK, Australia, etc. So, I mean, that's where we are in terms of what I'm doing in terms of like low budget stuff is harder to do here. and it's shrinking budgets. Distributors aren't funding as much anymore, from my perspective. I know, Aaron, you like there's a Aaron's in the same situation too. There's a spectrum. So there are still high budget projects happening. I'm not involved in those as much, but yeah. And like the indie, I'm also helping with an indie film, like that's all coming back to New York, which is great. So yeah.
So you're seeing indies pick up.
Yeah, indies are, I mean, from my perspective, yes.
That's great. And
Yeah.
Jax Raphael, tell us what are you seeing from your point of view?
I'm seeing, I come from the unscripted world, so documentaries, reality TV, lots of like food competitions, that kind of thing. And I'm seeing that, I mean, not just like a slowdown in the amount of orders. 5 years ago, maybe we got an order for 72 episodes, now maybe seven. So, I mean, the volume is really shrinking. And now the networks and streamers are actually asking us to come with some brand dollars too. And I think that what I see in the future is most likely positions that are starting to be created on the network side or the streamer side or even in the production company side where it's brand partnerships. And it seems to be tagging along with more world building IP. So it's not necessarily enough to have just, a great character story arc, but, where's the IP in that and how else can you monetize it for additional ROI? So I think the whole storytelling structure, from start to finish, is really starting to change. In some ways, it's exciting because it takes a lot of it's changing the note process as well. There seems to be a little bit more creative freedom there from a content creation standpoint. But that's what I've been seeing as the biggest
Right.
trend.
So they're looking for other ways to fund the project, right? Brand dollars is now you have to get it financed, and then hopefully you get a Ford Motor Company or whoever it might be to come on board and help subsidize.
Yeah, and potentially other products to go along with it. So
Hmm.
how do you build out the story to create other products that you can monetize?
Right.
That seems to be sort of, like where everything is going.
Got it.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk switch it over a little bit about technology and Aaron Gordon, your company is very deep in technology right now. You've been a producer, you've owned a production company. Tell us from your lens how you're seeing things have changed in the last few years with in regards to what's getting booked in your studios right now that maybe didn't exist a few years ago.
Yeah, I have a relatively unique, I think a unique perspective on this because I did start out having a production company for 13 years in commercial work. And so I think I saw the trend of offshoring very quickly. I mean, there wasn't a P&G bid that went out that was serviced in America for a long time for various reasons. I think as we saw that trend, we also saw the cyclical trend of going in-house versus out of house. And so, it's agencies grow and then brands take them in-house. And so I know a lot of what we're talking about is on the film side of things, but I think the commercial side has really affected the perspective on the film side in some of this because some of that pattern is now actually going kind of upward trajectory into the studio system. And on the technology side, I co-founded with a bunch of incredible partners, Synapse Virtual Production. We build volumes all over and service them. And one of the first things that we realized was kind of the promise of virtual production. I think people saw it popularized, by like The Mandalorian, and they said, okay, this is a cool new way to replace green screen on like big budget stuff. But the truth of the matter is, I think where a lot of things are going is there's a resurgence in what can be done in a studio or off location, because people are shooting outside of the US a lot. And so can you refake a location somewhere but somewhere else? And I think B, talent, right, has become a very expensive line item. It's always been one, but it's become more expensive to get the right talent in the right movie. And so we service a number of projects. What we see often in the volume is that for the higher budget projects, it's about how much can you do in a day with talent, to reduce the number of days. And I think that's been really cool to witness creative solutions around that. I think another thing that we've seen is uh, long past just it being a great tool for card process and that being kind of the standard now, we see location scanning becoming a big thing. And so to make budgets work, what people are doing is if they're shooting on location, they actually scan that location. And instead of going back there, they'll do pickups in a volume. Or, they'll do their big shots, wide shots on that location, and then they'll come back and they'll do all the rest of the shots with talent who doesn't want to or doesn't have a schedule to go to a different city, in a different city in the volume and do it digitally, right? And I think that's been really cool to see how we've been helping people there. Overall, the two trends that we see is that the kind of resurgence, like Jackie was talking about, the resurgence of indie filmmaking, right? People that have to make a budget really tight can now do a lot more utilizing that technology. And then I think people who have a larger budget can not only do more, but they're kind of putting the money on the screen in production rather than putting it necessarily in post now. And it kind of just changes that workflow a little bit. And so I think overall trend, everyone's buzzword is AI. I think we see a lot of AI workflows actually empowering some of the VP workflows that we're using right now. And I think Jax also said this in terms of world building, but you don't shoot anything on a volume without having built a world behind you. And I think we're entering the age of a 3D pipeline instead of a 2D pipeline. And I think when you create that world in a game engine, which it is, that works for your IP on the film side, it works on the gaming side, it plugs into, some Fortnite play, it plugs into some, but everything down to billboard advertising, everything is digital now. And so I thought Jax brought up a really good point where it's like, where you really start to see savings is you create one piece of digital content. We use it in our volume. Advertising uses it in a number of deliverables on their side, on their pipeline. A gaming partnership uses it now to enter some new game level. But that was all created from the same 3D digital pipeline. And so I think the interoperability, if I said that correctly, but just the ability to take one asset and put it across the entire chain of filmmaking between the film, the marketing, the partnerships, everything like Jax had mentioned, that's actually a really cool age that we're entering into right now, where a lot of tools that are being developed to really start to play into it. So that's my kind of overall take on state of the technological industry right now.
Thank you. So Andrew Stern, you've got some stages in New York, New Jersey area. Tell us what you're seeing, because you have both volume stages and traditional stages. Where are you seeing the trend with tech and AI?
Yeah, so my company, Be Electric Studios, we're a soundstage, equipment rental, and virtual production company. And so, yeah, we straddle, like Rudy said, traditional production and virtual production. Some of our stages are traditional, some are virtual. And like Jackie was saying, we're seeing budgets shrink. As everybody knows, every year we have these recurring shows that are coming back to us. And, like the few years ago, they would be 6 months on our stages, then they had to come down to 4 months, and now it's 2 months. And we're just talking with them, and it's like, how are you going to actually produce the same? Because they're not changing the number of episodes, and they're not changing the ask from the network in terms of what they're asking them to produce, but they're asking them to shrink it, and the budgets are shrinking. And so how do we do that? And virtual production is one of the tools that we've been able to offer for, like, say, for multi-location, to be able to reduce costs for them. But really, in terms of really keeping productions here in this country, what I wanted to talk about a little bit is about the tax credits, because like you were saying, Rudy, these productions really can shoot anywhere. They're volume stages all over the world now. And so how do we keep productions from leaving and going to other countries? Well, the only way is through film tax credits. And so one of the other organizations that I work with is the Production Initiatives Association, which is an organization here in New York, where we work to enhance the film tax credit in New York. And the latest organization that we started is called the Coalition for American Production, which is working to push forward a federal film tax credit. So tax credits have become, incredibly important in this shrinking budget landscape.
Great. So a kind of a question to everyone, uh, saying that, uh, and it's kind of where where are things being shot now that perhaps they weren't being shot just a few years ago because of tax credits, or because labor is so expensive in America compared to other countries. So I open it up for the whole panel to
62
answer.
35. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in running budgets, we're seeing, I think, Ireland, Australia, and Canada are getting a lot of our shows. I mean, a lot of the big shiny floor shows, for lack of a better term, have left, right? Lego Masters went to Australia, the floor went to Ireland, and then in the
Thank you.
scripted
Have a
world,
great day.
I'm sorry. In the scripted world, we're seeing the same thing, right? So I think from my perspective, it's those countries in UK.
Yeah.
Chuck?
To build off of what Jackie was saying, I think you can always follow the tax incentives in terms of what infrastructure then gets built, because the same areas that she's flagging, Budapest also, if you looked 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Budapest wasn't even on the map for production, and all of a sudden, because of just the cost there plus some new incentives, right? Like it is it's actually taking some of the work away from London that previously was originated in the US, went to London, and now you see it in Budapest. And so I think general theme of some of those areas is that when the second you get comfortable, you have the established infrastructure, and you think that labor rates are good where you are, the same pattern happens where somebody else is hungrier, their labor is either the same cost or cheaper, they introduce a new incentive and they start pulling from that same pool. And so I think the only territories other than Budapest I'd add, I mean, New Zealand, right? Like right next to Australia as well, but New Zealand is really pressing right now as well. And I can't think of any other territories that are like constantly on the radar.
Aaron, I'm going to build on that a little bit because I'm watching the chat over here. Is how is it that some people are mentioning in the chat that finding crew can be challenging in other countries, and how are they solving that beyond the tax credits? And this is to the whole group. Obviously there's a financial incentive, but actually getting people that are the right skill set there to do the work.
Yeah, I can touch on that first, and then I really want to let some of these other amazing folks speak. I joined CAP as a board member, and this is actually a big thing for me when we talk about infrastructure, because what people don't realize is that these countries are actually putting a lot of money into training and building that infrastructure. And so, part of what happens is the cycle is it's so cheap. Someone introduces a tax incentive. It's so cheap to shoot there that even flying in half your, all your keys or your crew, it's still cheaper to shoot it in that place than it is to do it domestically, or now sometimes even in London. And then what happens over time is that they, on government dollars, invest a lot of money into training these people up. Plus, because of all these films going over there or commercials going over there, people need juniors on set, and they just learn from us, right? They just learn from our folks going over there, some of the best training them. And so, part of one speaking of incentives that's actually really important is, like, I think we take for granted that legacy is here, we're the best, but the truth of the matter is we're also training globally workforce that is now competitive on price and on current resume, right, over the past few years. And so the second you kind of take your eye off the ball, all of a sudden this infrastructure pops up somewhere else, and before you know it, they've worked on 7 major blockbuster films. They're good to go. Someone looks at their resume, they go, I'm going to hire that person. They just worked on these 7 films in a row. So I think that's one of the other major components that we're seeing territory after territory of people getting trained up.
Yeah, I've seen in let's say a country like Czech Republic, Prague, they've been going strong for 25 years now. We have the second generation of filmmakers coming up in countries like that, and that's definitely uh, helping taking more work away from the States. Um, Colin, is there any questions that are coming up that are I'm not viewing the chat that we should bring up that
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ones that just came up, which I think can dovetail into everything we're saying, is, we're talking about production to television and movies, but also where are you guys seeing it to the small screens, to the streamers, and where is that crossing over, obviously with a lot of the AI side of things right now, crossing over into what would be the influencer world to people generating, AI to now replace the influencer into that. Like where's the through line that's coming through the industry to that as well?
Yeah, I can start this piece of the conversation. So my company, we're a small studio, UK and US based, and it started in the UK, but we're traditional television, like hour, half hours. They started doing short form for AVOD, and we have our own channel on YouTube, and we're posting videos that we're making and just monetizing off YouTube, which many companies are doing, as we know. And one of our big shows, we cut them up, they monetize on YouTube as well to hit this short form, low attention span market that is developing fast. The other, like Jax and I are talking about getting into the microdrama space. I know everyone's getting into it, but like that is blowing up, as we all know. So yes, I think it's moving toward short form completely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a partnership with Sony Pictures. They opted not to do a streamer like a Paramount. Instead, they are investing in their YouTube studio, and short form is definitely part of that whole building experience. I think that, for, you know, for Avalon, probably where Jackie is, when they're doing like really big films or even indie films, you can build out the world with short form as well. And, that goes to, maybe like a 20-minute film and maybe even 20-second shorts. It can just, there are so many different ways to get a story out there now. And that's really what we're looking to do at Sony as well, with a lot of these different properties that we're looking to build out. And in terms of the AI, I've been working a lot with, and I can put, it's called Movie Flow AI. It's movieflowai.com. I can put it in the chat. But it's a really brilliant platform that aggregates a lot of these AI tools like a Nano Banana, um, and some of the other bigger ones that are out there, and it really does create like a beautiful, easy to follow storytelling system, and that you can review your work, you can invite people to make notes on legal and RNC. So it's like kind of like building your storyboard out there for previs, for films or animation films, for micro dramas. You can even we're doing a documentary right now, a sports documentary. There's very little archive footage, and we're just recreating everything historically. I know that Nat Geo is doing like a 3-hour doc right now that's all in AI. Even the historical characters that are speaking in all of the interviews, some of them are no longer here. And it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to put it in the chat, but I would highly recommend looking at Movie Flow AI. And if you want to hit me up on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to get Michael Levine, the owner, to get you some credits. It's a really cool platform, and it's been helping us out a lot with many different projects in different verticals.
Well, I think maybe this is a good opening because I see a question here from Kristen about people wanting to come back to work in New York And where are the opportunities right now within the workforce and within workforce training? Because obviously, as Aaron mentioned, there's outside of the US, there's people training up, to someone that maybe is younger and just starting out and want to get into this field. Jax, you just mentioned the AI side. I mean, the obvious thing is learn that, because that seems to be where it's going. But where else can people, get started and find opportunities? Where I think no matter what industry you touch, and I work with a lot of other creative agencies, this is a through line. These are all fighting for the same budgets as well. Whether you're designing any kind of collateral for a big logo brand, or you're, producing something, you're fighting for the same dollars. If you want to get into this business and you're passionate about it, like where would you guide the younger person right now? If you could go back in time, and that's open up to any of the panelists.
Yeah. Yeah, I could take this one. I think in virtual production specifically, there's a real serious lack of qualified technicians that are trained in the space, and so I think that we've experienced that in our company in terms of finding qualified people. It's taken a lot of time to build a team, and so my recommendation for anyone trying to get into the business now would be to try to find a stage to work on, as an assistant, and to learn whatever it is that the track, whether it be, as a gaffer or a grip or whatever, to learn lighting, for example, through the perspective of virtual production, because then that skill set is going to become a lot more valuable. And I've seen that trajectory happen with the folks that we've taken on through internships and various other job training programs that we've been involved in. So I think that technology is super important for anyone breaking into it, specifically with virtual production and AI as well.
I'm biased, but I 1000% agree with that. And they're well-paying jobs. So that would be my recommendation.
And in regards to, I guess competing with now what feels like an international workforce, is there any specific skills that, US based people should be focusing on that, is maybe a little less a danger, or more insulated from those other pressures? Or in addition, is there anything that happens in the US that isn't happening in these other locations that is US specific and or European specific, that's not going to, go that way?
Oh,
Maybe that was a hard question.
it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question, and my head went to legal, because which we haven't talked about at all, but that's a big part of producing, is the legal side of everything. And if everything's global now, and every country has different requirements in terms of legal. So we're producing all of this stuff and it's going on global platforms. Well, you have to be mindful of what you're shooting and what kind of releases you're getting and what can be shown in certain countries and what it can't be. I mean, we have shows obviously that are global, and like we're geo-blocking certain regions on certain topics. You have to. So that's like another whole thing. Just like get into legal.
Be a lawyer.
But it's funny that you say that, Jackie, but I know that specifically AI has taken away an enormous amount of legal billing hours for instance, reading contracts. AI could read a contract in 2 seconds, less than 2 seconds, right? With some very specific prompts to look for in a doc that used to take an attorney maybe an hour. Um, do you guys are you using ChatGPT or other platforms like that? Are you seeing how um, um, are those technologies, how that's playing in?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using it. I think, unfortunately, I mean, it's really helpful, but it does take away from, certain jobs that we're able to hire for. So, for instance, we were, just doing like a POC for a possible history channel show. And we were like, how many episodes could we get out of this, right? And it was probably 50 episodes that we put together with ChatGPT in the course of like 2 days. And that would have taken maybe a month for like a researcher and like a development PA to even just like cobble together all the information, not even to put it together like deck form, and so it's great because we were able to do it really quickly. But on the other hand, it's like the process is diminishing, the necessity to hire more people, and it makes me feel bad.
Well, but it also
I mean, it's
uh,
helpful, but
yeah,
yeah.
it opens up new opportunities for people. I know that talking to people doing commercials, um, learning they're hiring people that use ChatGPT and other platforms like that really well to help them bid and put together a script. Let's say, for instance, you're looking for a snow-capped mountain in July. You could prompt in a few proper keywords. Do you guys see it with your staff to help you perhaps bid or run the company? How ChatGPT is changing how you fundamentally ran your company or bid out work?
I have perspective on this. My stance on this is always people first, and I'll go great lengths to defend that stance. I think that what it really comes down to is efficiency. And we talk so much about generative AI on the content side, but I'm glad we're talking about the actual business function side of it, right? Because I think it's there's no denying that. Coming from the commercial side of things, what used to take a week of pitching can now be done in a day, right? And that is due to both generative AI for imagery samples and set of image searches and other aspects of it. It's also just quickly being able to iterate on things. And I think the best way that I can describe the fear-based perspective on this versus the opportunistic based perspective on this is I think there's a lot of people out there that see this and they fear it and they go, it's going to replace jobs. And I would just like to point out the same way that COVID was a trend accelerator. COVID wasn't a new thing in terms of how it affected the like businesses. It just accelerated trends because of how impactful it was on the world, right? When major events happen, and I think this influx of AI technology is a major event. The fear-based side says that this is going to affect jobs and they won't get replaced. And what we've seen at every standpoint in both technology or major world event is that it just reshapes the landscape. And I think it's because at the end of the day, businesses want more output. And that's the function of business is to get as much output to thrive as a business. And that creates a lot of opportunities. And so to hit on what you're talking about, rather than just ChatGPT, but just any AI model that is assistant functionality, I think it's accelerating people's ability to do their role. And while it's easy to say, okay, well, this one person has now replaced three bodies they might manage, or they might work with functionality from some of these programs, three new roles pop up because that's just met with, well, now we have to output more. And I think we can say that in production as well. Like we can't actually say that globally production has slowed down, right? Like we keep in the US, we talk about this, but actually production has accelerated in a lot of ways. It looks different. All the formats of it are very different, but it's not like there's been this incredible slowdown of production globally. There's traditional production has slowed down in a lot of regions, but in a lot of regions it's sped up. Again, going back to tax incentives, it just looks very different. And so, just from a broad perspective, what I would say is that, um, if you embrace it, the number one thing that like we talk about in the company all the time recently is like this idea of like autonomous AI, right? Like AGI and creating agents. Like this is like the year everyone said of agents. Every agentic workflow that I've seen usually has like a number of failure points. It only enhances the gaps your company already has or that you already have in your workflow. If you have a problematic point in your workflow and you try to make that autonomous, it's just going to be that much worse because there's no QCing, right? And so, all this to say, I think the opportunity for everyone on the call, but everyone when they're looking at the industry is, yes, you should try to keep an eye on a position that might not exist in 5 years. But with a very similar skill set, there's probably a new position that plus learning one new thing that now exists and now is going to go in-house that used to be a freelance position at a streamer, and now you're going to get a six-figure salary job to do it. And so I think that's the way that I'm looking at cyclically how some of these things are changing. We use it all the time. Our joke is if there's a task that sucks, if we have a workflow chart for it, how quickly can we get that workflow chart into a quick GPT specific to that task, right? And I hope everyone's doing that right now because it is going to get rid of a lot of the busy work. But there are immensely new amounts of jobs that are getting created like daily in our industry and other industries by just learning a couple new things. So that's just always my perspective on the use of the tools.
I think that dovetails well into a question I see here, which is um, how do you guys feel the unions, SAG and whatnot, are they seeing this? Are they pivoting? Are they thinking about, broadening their membership so that they're a bigger tent that, as these jobs and the virtual talent is, it's obviously a sensitive subject. And how's that playing out? Or how are you guys seeing that play out? Or is it just too early days to tell? I stumped everybody here.
I mean, it's too early days to tell. We're not
Yeah.
there yet. I'm not there yet anyway. But I think they have to, would be my answer. To like, they have to because this is moving and it's moving quickly, and I don't think any of us can stop it.
I want to pivot for a moment and back to our original question on where are we going? Movie theaters. I grew up going to the movies every weekend, once or twice. My generation, that was what it was all about. I have children that are teenagers, have no interest in going to the movies. Um, where do you guys see the future of theaters? Is there a future? When I could buy 100-inch television for less than $1,000 or an incredibly high lumen projector for less than that, in 5, 10 years, are movie theaters open?
I have such a major opinion on this that I just gotta go on this one. I think novel experiences are going that require people being in person together are going to be so valuable in the next 10 years because of the amount of content that people are being inundated with on a daily basis on their phone. And I think that while the trend today might still be in favor of a lot of quick content, I think that the point of a movie theater got reinvented. Before it was because if it's a movie, it's on a big screen and it's great. Now it's because I'm so tired of sitting at home and just sitting with the same, my family unit and just doing nothing on a Friday night. And I think that it's why you saw movie theaters first reinvent themselves with comfortable seating and like, adding, food and beverage. And listen, I think we can all agree there's a major debate right now on Netflix's play on Warner Brothers versus Paramount's bid going on, all these things. And the big question is this like the death, the classic, is this the death of movie theaters? But I think it is trending with the same gap we're seeing in cinema, which is that um, there's two things that happen simultaneously. One, your experience has to be that much more worth your money because you're leaving your house with your comfortable setup, with your big TV, and you're having an experience with other people. So why is that experience incredible? Not just the movie itself, but the experience. And then the movie itself has to be that much better because you do have a teenager who has like the world's biggest expectations that is never met now with like any piece of content. So the movies actually have to be that much better. And so I think the pressure is on to make better content to be on the screens, but I actually think that live events, movie theaters, like anything to get people in a room together, I think we're just starting to see the beginning of people being tired of looking down at their phone all the time, regardless of age. And I think one of the biggest trends we're seeing and actually in the younger generation now that's growing up is for everyone that is like happy to do their screen time through the roof the people the novelty is people shutting off their phones and so I honestly think and maybe this is optimism and hopefulness for humanity But I honestly think that this idea that the experience of being together to witness something culturally that impacts you at the same time is not going to go away. It's just going to reinvent itself over and over again.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
going to jump in if that's okay. I've been listening to a lot of my friends speak, especially Aaron. Um, and uh, I'm both a DGA and ASC member. So for me, the theatrical experience is critically important. And I think to touch upon what Aaron was saying is I think there is going to be a renewed desire for what is called an experience, and I think, the individual immersion into content consumption, with a phone and a tablet, and, I think it's just the same issue as why do people go to concerts as opposed to listening to music at home? It's because that experience is so much greater. It has sort of an emphasis on the social experience aside from the experience to the medium that I think is really important. I think if COVID has told us anything, is that we humans are very much social animals, and that that need will never go away. The one thing I wish that the industry would actually realize, and that's true of a few theaters, who have sort of upgraded the level of experience that is going to movie theaters. There are too many instances where going to movie theater, it's the theater itself is not clean, or it's not entirely perfect, or the screening room is so tiny you feel like, why am I not looking at my OLED TV? Because the blacks are high, and there's no contrast, and and the viewing technical sort of parameters of it makes it a non-satisfying experience. So I think I would love for anybody who's in New York who doesn't know, I would love for them to go to Metrograph. And see what kind of experience it is there, to go and see a movie and then either have a dinner in the facility or have drinks in the facility before and after. And all of a sudden you have an experience that is worth, going out of your house and say, okay, you know what, yes, I'm going to take the subway and I'm going to go and see that film, and that really sort of brings the experience to a new level, which I think is something that we've forgotten. I think we all despair at the fact that Netflix is going to buy Warner Brothers. Oh my God, that's the death of cinemas. But I think in the past, I think it's been a fault of an entire industry to not invest in the experience itself. While other industries have done that, this industry is not. So I think there is, if the experience is great again, I hate to have used that phrase, but if the experience is enjoyable again, here we go, rephrased it, then I think people will go. I think it's inevitable. Look, I get dozens and dozens and dozens of screeners a year, and most of them now are digital. And I had to plug in, go to Apple TV or go to this, go to that, and then put in your license code, and then you get one watch it once. I've decided not to do that. I've decided that it's better, I have 5 screenings to go to this week, and I'm going to try to go to every single one of them, because that's the experience. And I think we all have to make the effort, to push towards making sure people who are the helm of this industry understand that the theater experience is very important, but it has to be enjoyable. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. So movie theaters aren't going to die. Colin, any questions? I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Are there any other questions that?
Yeah, I've got one that I want to touch on, and I'm going to call on Andrew a little bit on this one, and then I think we have a couple of people that want to weigh in here for a second as well. And this kind of comes back to the prior question, which is the small screen versus big screen. And I'm wondering, and maybe Aaron, you too, and Andrew, are you seeing the tea leaves a little bit of what's being done on the stages, and what is there YouTube work, is there vertical work being done there, what kind of contents are you seeing? I think you guys are a little bit on the front lines from the stage standpoint of what you're seeing, and is there a trend that we maybe are a little bit too far away that you are close enough to see? Also, there was another question in here on that same topic of how much growth you've seen in like the LED stages as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing from I'll just talk from a stage like booking standpoint because that's I guess
Yeah.
where I'm closest to it and it's the types of projects that are booking with us. And yeah, I mean the short form work for us has been incredibly important part of our business and we're seeing a lot more, sort of smaller YouTube creators coming into the studios, even starting to use our LED stages. I mean, I think one of our strengths is that we've tried to sort of democratize volume work and bring down the cost as much as possible, and try to be able to make it accessible to a bunch of different budget points, essentially. And so yeah, that's allowed us to have all these different types of projects. And so we're doing commercials, music videos. And a lot of YouTube work from creators, as well as car process for the larger productions. But yeah, this type of work is definitely on the increase from we can see it from a booking perspective for sure.
Well, and I'm wondering from where I sit as a finance person who looks at budgets for all different types of anything that touches advertising, and especially with not just production, but as I mentioned before, with creative agencies, I'm seeing a tightening on all margins across the board. Like Andrew, when you're dealing with, these what used to now maybe this is traditional, maybe it used to be more non-traditional. How do you see them approaching the cost and the budgets? Is there downward pressure and is there an expectation that it should be cheaper? How's that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, constantly, every single job that we get now, especially, I mean, it's really every job, whether it be traditional stages or virtual production. It's more for less, and we are constantly having to try to find ways to streamline our workflow and bring down the cost because it's there's constant downward pressure on every single job and constant negotiation for that. So yeah, that's we're seeing that across the board for sure.
Into the broader group of panelists, I want to stay on money for a minute because none of this happens without it. Is there has there been a change in the last 2 years on how people are approaching budgets? And on that same topic, there's we have a first lady who just started a production company and a prince in the U.S. and his wife. Like everyone's trying to get in this business at the same time, or it feels that way. And then also the budgets are tightening. Like it seems to be you can't have it both ways a little bit. So, how's that playing out in the broader sense to the panelists?
I have not to bring this back to tax incentives, but I do have a specific thought on this, which is that for someone to stay in the US, those dollars get purposed differently right now than they would abroad, right? And so in the US, we see it as tightening budgets. And don't get me wrong, there's tons of that, and again, I come from the commercial space. I saw the trend of that for a decade but budgets tightening. But it is in a lot of ways, it is a matter of where you are and how you purpose those dollars too. We've seen a really big range, if I'm being honest. We've seen budgets that have really tightened, and we've seen budgets that seem very healthy for what they should be, and especially if they're utilizing, a certain amount of VP and they're utilizing it correctly to actually get the efficiencies and savings off of that. But what I will say is that the point of, the rebates and these tax incentives is that they're de-risking their money. It does change the way they look at the numbers because, when you can spend $100 million and you've de-risked $50 million right off the bat before you've spent the dollar, the money does get spent differently. It's like the classic mindset of if you see $5 in your bank account and you look at your bank account, you're going to spend that $5 a lot more wisely than if you see $1,000 in your bank account or you see $1 million in your bank account, right? Like, the last money gets spent a lot more frugally than it does otherwise. And so I think, there's no denying that budgets are getting tighter. I do think that part of people feeling it less is when that money gets de-risked from the top. And I think that's a really important note that I think we should all be tracking. And I think it's also important, and Andrew and I can talk about VP all day long, right? But like there are a lot of aspects or tools or situations in film that have gotten more efficient, if you know how to use it well. And anyone who here is a producer and you're working off of 1,000 line items on your budget, sometimes it's not about the overall budget's tighter. Sometimes it's about justifying, hey, what used to be 2 line items I can pull from these 10 line items now because actually I'm getting these 10 line items worth with this one thing. And so it just becomes a creative working numbers conversation of I budgeted for this, I have a pool of this amount of money. I'm thinking of this thing as this amount of money, but actually it covers all of these things now that I educate myself on it. And so we can repurpose those dollars a lot better. So I do think it's a mixture of the purpose of the dollars and the de-risking of the dollars for sure.
Rudy, I'm going to turn the table and ask you a question or let you kind of plug this a little bit because this is where we've hovered around this and you have been I mean, full disclosure, Rudy was my very first client almost 20 years ago. So that's how long I've known Rudy. But Rudy, you've worn a lot of hats in this world. You were a commercial production company, service production company, Edge Auto. You've serviced the Emerald trailers, and now in your sort of next of many of your storyline career is advocating for this. Like, I think behooves us to all kind of like, how can people get involved in this tax side of it? Because it's obviously a big part of it and the incentive side.
Yeah, I think at this point in the game for all of us, regardless of where you are in any of the 50 states or whatever country you may be from, it's all about the tax incentive. It's all about where do I get my script and put the best value to it, which is going to come down to costs, right? If our technology is becoming equal, if the infrastructure is becoming equal, which it is, 20 years ago when I was shooting in most of the states or around different countries, you had to bring in quite a lot. Today, it's much less. So it's going to come down to where does the dollar go further? So that means where is the best tax incentive? So I would urge everyone who's on this call to join up with your local state coalitions that are fighting for tax incentives because it means everything. Look at New Jersey. New Jersey wasn't on the map just a few years ago, right? Atlanta, right? California owned everything. Then New York came up. Why? Because of tax incentives. All of these locations are built because of tax incentives. And from a national standpoint, a US national standpoint, America has to. We have no choice but to get a federal tax incentive because if we don't, more and more production will leave the US and go abroad. And for most of us on this call, that's horrible. And as the cost of doing production grows, that gap will grow and more projects will leave. Right now, we know that more than 50% of the projects that are being generated in the US leave to shoot elsewhere. So, to plug CAP, I would tell everyone at least go to our website, check it out, cap, usacap.org. But again, fight for the best tax incentive you can wherever you are, because without that, your state or your country is going to feel the pain.
We're coming to the end, Rudy. I'm going to jump in real quick because Pam has politely raised her hand and I just saw that. So I want to get back to the audience real quick. Pam, you have a question? Hold on, you're muted. We're going to
Yeah,
unmute.
sorry.
You
No,
go.
what I wanted to do was we were talking about the experience. So last week we met with the Airbnb team. Airbnb has the Airbnb experience. They are putting a lot of time and a lot of talent into creating the very things we were talking about. How do we get people off the phone? What does experiences look like? And what their business module is, they're looking for something that groups of 10 people can get together and do. And they finished up a big campaign in Paris and they just moved into Los Angeles. So when we met with them last week, they were reaching out to a lot of businesses who do what we do in Hollywood to say, hey, what can we do as far as experiences to see the process of filmmaking? And which I find absolutely fascinating because the things that everybody here does, you love it. Why would you stay in it? It's too much trouble if you didn't love what you do. And, I certainly plan to keep doing this for quite a long time. So just to let you know that experiencing this process, that is so on Airbnb's radar. And I can't emphasize how much talent and money they're putting into this whole thing.
Well, we're coming to time. I want to thank all the panelists for joining us and the audience. This was kind of put together on a bit of a whim, and I am humbled by the turnout, and it's been a great conversation. As I mentioned, we recorded this. I will make it available and send the link out to everyone that joined it. Continue the conversation. Get connected with everyone on LinkedIn who put their LinkedIn in the chat, so that you can reach out and make some networks and go to the movies, advocate for tax incentives. Let's support the creative agencies out there that are making great work. And to the younger people, keep your eyes wide open to where to get involved. And it's not maybe it's a role that didn't exist before. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.